It was the peak of the July sun in 2015 when the Brennan triplets Jake, Luke, and Cole set out from their hometown of Billings, Montana, for an adventure they'd spent months planning in secret. They were turning 22, and this milestone felt like the perfect opportunity for an escape into the heart of Glacier National Park. From birth, the Brennan brothers had been an inseparable trio, bound together not only by mirrored features but by a friendship so deep that locals often joked the three shared a single soul. If you saw one, you'd surely see the other two at their father's auto shop, around town, even at the diner where they always ordered the same breakfast. They lived close to each other, worked side by side, and rarely spent more than a few hours separated. The trip they envisioned was straightforward: 5 days in the isolated Blackfoot Valley, far from cell signals and crowded trails, where they could hike, fish, and savor the wildness Montana offered in summer's peak. On the morning of July 15th, their usual silver Ford truck was packed to the roof with tents, reels, hiking supplies, and enough sustenance for a week, even though they only planned to be gone for 5 days. Their mother, Linda, stood at the porch watching, her brow furrowed in concern. To neighbors, Linda's anxiety seemed stronger than usual. She repeatedly insisted the boys double-check their gear, particularly the emergency radio and water jugs. Jake, charismatic and always the planner, reassured her everything was under control. He showed her printed maps, a weather forecast he'd studied like scripture, and his carefully organized supply list. Montana's terrain was familiar terrain to the Brennan boys, who'd cut their teeth camping and trekking in the same region since their teenage years. They knew the risks on expected weather, wild animals, rough trails, and weren't the kind that underestimated anything. Their last confirmed public sighting was at Murphy's General Store in West Glacier at 2:30 that afternoon. The shop's owner, Bill Murphy, remembered them vividly in his statement to authorities. 3 cheerful young men, full of jokes about trout and sibling rivalry. They picked up fresh batteries, fishing line, and an extra bag of ice for their cooler. It was a routine stop, but they paid in cash, kept the transaction simple, and left without a printed receipt. Driving the Ford north toward the Blackfoot access road, their designated campsite was described as a hidden patch near the edge of Hidden Lake, accessible half by memory and half by navigating a winding 8-mile path through a thick pine forest. The area was coveted for its peace cell towers didn't reach here, and even on weekends you'd be lucky to spot a ranger or another visitor. For the Brennans, who'd camped there on earlier trips, the choice was deliberate: total solitude amid unpredictable weather and wild country. When July 20th rolled by without the boys' return, their parents initially assumed an extension of adventure. Spontaneous plans had always been part of their camping trips, and the brothers were responsible young men. But by late evening of July 21st, with no word from the triplets, Linda's worry escalated. That night, she contacted the Flathead County Sheriff's Office, explaining that her sons hadn't been out of touch for more than 2 days in their lives. Sheriff David Walsh put, Deputy Rebecca Stone in charge, a seasoned local officer renowned for her work in wilderness search and rescue. Stone immediately grasped the gravity of the case. 3 experienced outdoorsmen missing at the same time, in territory they knew well, was troubling and unusual. She didn't waste time. By late afternoon, Stone led a team into the Blackfoot Valley to investigate. They quickly located the Brennans' pickup in a small, shaded clearing near the trailhead for Hidden Lake. The truck was unlocked, the keys sitting neatly on the dash, and nothing appeared amiss. Inside, Stone and her team found their wallets, each containing ID cards and $340 cash in total. Their cell phones, drained of power, were tucked in the glove box. No struggle, no forced entry, just an orderly arrangement of gear that suggested deliberation, not distress. Stone made a note: the truck was parked with intention, hidden from the main road, shaded and flawlessly positioned for a quick exit. The boys had expected to return. Tire tracks confirmed no other vehicles had visited the clearing recently, ruling out many possible scenarios. The preliminary search focused on the well-trodden 3-mile stretch between the clearing and Hidden Lake, known for rocky passages and narrow bridges across 2 streams. Stone assembled 6 park rangers and local volunteers to comb the trail inch by inch. Search dogs, brought in from neighboring Kalispell, quickly picked up a scent that led towards the lake. Roughly halfway along the path, the first tangible clue surfaced: a blue baseball cap with the Brennan Family Auto Shop logo, carefully suspended on a low pine branch. The cap was Cole's. He was youngest by 7 minutes, his brothers liked to remind him. It looked intentionally placed rather than lost. No rips, no soil stains, no sign of struggle, pressing forward toward the water's edge. The dog suddenly lost the trail near a pronounced rocky outcrop. It wasn't gradual, the scent simply stopped. Ground teams swept the area intensively, but no further evidence emerged. It was as though the 3 young men had vanished on that spot, baffling both rangers and canine handlers. Scents usually fade slowly, not in a clean cutoff. With time pressing, the search operation expanded rapidly. Teams from multiple counties joined in, helicopters scanned massive swaths of land overhead, and volunteers trekked every nearby trail, creek bed, and likely campsite over a 10-mile radius. Support arrived from the Montana National Guard aircraft and manpower, transforming the incident into one of the largest coordinated searches ever mounted in state memory. Despite the scale of the operation, no new clues came to light. Not a scrap of camping equipment, not a stray footprint, not a sign of disturbed brush or vegetation. The region's geography was unforgiving: steep ravines, dense woods, and fast rivers that could conceal a great deal. Yet Stone and her colleagues agreed it was highly unusual, even in such harsh terrain, to find no trace whatsoever, especially given the brothers' experience. After a strenuous 2 weeks, the full-scale search was slowly wound down. Helicopter flyovers and occasional volunteer patrols replaced the initial intensity. Officially, the case remained a priority, but resources shifted to other pressing emergencies. The disappearance of the Brennan triplets, however, left a haunting silence in the wilderness, one that would only deepen as new questions emerged. Despite official search efforts winding down, the Brennan family refused to abandon hope. Their determination became legendary through Billings and stretched out across Montana's mighty landscapes. Tom and Linda Brennan, joined by relatives and friends, personally organized search parties, distributing flyers in surrounding towns and trailheads. Coverage of the disappearance grew, spreading from local newspapers and radio stations to TV broadcasts throughout the Northwest. The unsettling mystery, a trio of identical brothers gone missing in the wilderness, captured the imagination of people far beyond their hometown. Law enforcement meticulously checked every clue, but no evidence of foul play surfaced. Authorities reviewed the triplets' finances and relationships thoroughly. There were no signs of debt, dispute, or unresolved issues. Their bank accounts sat untouched. Calls and messages stopped abruptly after their last sighting, and social media held no hidden clues, only the normal excited posts about camping. Interviews with friends, co-workers, and anyone who had contact with the brothers revealed nothing but anticipation for their weekend adventure. Plans had been made for the following weekend. Conversations about future fishing trips were left unfinished. As summer waned and autumn leaves fell, hope inched toward heartbreak. By October, the Brennan family held a memorial service, a somber gathering, yet they refused to accept the finality of loss. Linda insisted her sons were still alive somewhere, possibly injured but resilient. Their apartment remained unchanged, with rent paid every month and their belongings untouched. Awaiting their return, the family's auto repair shop stayed shuttered, its front window sporting a handwritten sign, "Gone fishing back soon." Locals passed by daily, pausing to remember the triplets and whisper theories. The shop itself became a kind of landmark, marking the divide between the hope of return and the reality of the unknown. As the air turned frigid and snows buried the Blackfoot Valley, search efforts slowed to a halt. Frozen terrain and blizzards rendered even the most determined ground teams powerless to continue. Reports, interviews, and search maps amassed into thick case files, but no new leads appeared. The brothers had disappeared without a trace, casting a shadow over their community. When spring 2016 arrived and the snow melted, hope was rekindled. Linda Brennan, undeterred, devoted the winter months to planning for fresh search operations. She recruited volunteers, wrote letters, and pored over every available map of Glacier National Park. Her conviction was unshakable. Her boys had survived somehow and were waiting to be rescued. Tom Brennan gave silent support, though grief grew with each passing day. Publicly, he helped organize renewed efforts. Privately, he wrestled with accepting what seemed inevitable. Deputy Rebecca Stone, now deeply familiar with the case, reactivated search teams in May. The previous winter had been especially harsh, blanketing the wilderness with record snowfall. Stone theorized that thawing ice and melting drifts might expose long-buried evidence. This time, search teams included not only local rangers but mountaineers and caving experts, equipped to reach places that were previously too treacherous or remote. In addition, new technology was brought: in-ground penetrating radar, drones, and forensic mapping software. Every conceivable resource was tapped. In hopes that the shifting landscape would reveal a clue, with spring's thaw, the search area expanded. Teams explored high ridges, narrow valleys, and complex cave formations. Helicopters searched from above, while ground crews meticulously retraced trails and combed creek beds. On the second week, hope flickered. The volunteers spotted a battered camping stove sticking out from beneath fallen branches by a creek nearly 4 miles from where the dogs had lost the triplets' trail. The stove was dug from the muddy debris and sent to the crime lab. Analysis revealed it had rusted in the elements for years, ruling out any direct connection to the Brennan boys. Still, the effort was exhaustive, with hundreds of square miles traversed on foot and by air. But the wilderness yielded nothing further. No clothing, no gear, no new footprints. Again. The family was forced to grapple with the merciless enormity of the wild. Even for experts, the dangers were many: unpredictable weather, sudden rock slides, hidden rivers, and crackling streams. The terrain was a labyrinth where anyone could vanish in minutes. Yet despite all the risks, no trace at all was decidedly rare, especially for 3 experienced young men familiar with these mountains. As months passed, media attention faded, replaced by other stories. But for the Brennan family, hope compelled them to persist. Linda made appearances on local TV, sharing their story and urging anyone with information to come forward. She offered a $25,000 reward, the sum painfully raised by selling their house and downsizing to a modest apartment. Tom reopened the auto shop, determined to keep its doors open as a tribute and beacon for their boys. Locals came by as much to offer sympathy or share ideas as to request repairs. The shop evolved into a gathering point, its walls covered in search maps and phone lists of volunteers. Throughout 2016 and into 2017, searches continued when weather allowed, with hikers, hunters, and outdoorsmen asked to keep watch for lost equipment or any clue. The community's commitment endured, especially among fellow explorers who understood the unpredictable hazards of the immense Montana backcountry. Search and rescue professionals started to discuss theories in greater detail. Some speculated the triplets were swept away by freak weather flash floods, a sudden snowstorm, an avalanche. The wild can become deadly in minutes, leaving no trace of those caught in its turn. Others suggested accidental falls into deep crevasses or cave systems, where rescue is nearly impossible. The most troubling theory, however, rarely spoken aloud: the possibility of encountering someone with malicious intent. Though isolated, the region was not untouched by human activity. Illegal hunting, drug trade routes, or simply a stranger wishing to remain unseen could pose dangers. Yet nothing in the evidence or in the triplets' personalities suggested violence. The brothers were well-liked, peaceable, and left no sign of confrontation. By mid-2017, official efforts became limited to sporadic helicopter flyovers and reminders for hikers to report items or unusual events. The case remained open, but investigation slowed to a crawl. The family's personal search did not falter. Most weekends, Tom and Linda ventured into the wilderness themselves, calling their sons names, hoping to hear an echo in the wind. The relentless uncertainty began to take its toll. Linda's health declined, weighed down by exhaustion and anxiety. She wrestled with insomnia, spending night after night scanning satellite images and maps, searching in every patch of green for hope, for closure, for the faintest sign their sons still waited to be found. Those closest to Linda grew increasingly worried about her consuming preoccupation with the search. Friends voiced concerns that her resolve was bordering on obsession, but Linda's answer never wavered. To stop searching would feel like she was abandoning her sons when they still needed her most. When the calendar marked 2 years since Jake, Luke, and Cole vanished, the Brennan family passed the anniversary with a quiet, aching vigil in July 2017. They gathered at the forested trailhead where the brothers had started their last hike, joined by friends and volunteers who had walked the mountains and woods alongside them. Among the tall pines, wildflowers were arranged at the base of a tree, and Linda read aloud a heartfelt letter, her vow to keep searching. No matter how much time passed stopped by the autumn of 2017, a somber realism crept in even among the most hopeful supporters. The faint possibility of finding the brothers alive was slipping away. Yet for the family, closure was still painfully out of reach. Uncertainty and unanswered questions tormented them. They longed for a resolution that would allow real grieving, even if it meant heartbreak. The case was now cited as Montana's most baffling missing persons mystery. Law enforcement officers privately admitted they'd hit a wall. Every conventional search, every investigator's tool, had been deployed, but the absolute lack of evidence was itself a revelation. It suggested the triplets' fate was sealed somewhere so remote, so hidden, that even specialists could not breach it. Local papers continued to revisit the enigma, especially as summer approached, the season when hikers and campers once again filled Montana's trails. The story of the Brennan triplets became a kind of legend, a warning about the unforgiving vastness of the state's wilderness, a stark reminder that sometimes people could simply vanish without a trace. As the third Christmas neared for the family, the air was thick with the familiar ache of absence. The family's auto shop remained open, although Tom Brennan found it nearly impossible to focus on repairs or day-to-day life. Their son's apartment, untouched, preserved, almost sacred, became both a refuge and a wound, frozen in the hope that one day the boys would somehow reappear in its doorway. The winter of 2017 crept by, marked by the same excruciating uncertainty that had defined the Brennans' everyday life for over 2 years. Linda, driven by hope and longing, adopted a near-ritualistic routine, scouring missing person forums, joining social media groups dedicated to lost hikers, and exchanging letters of encouragement and shared despair with other families facing similar limbo. She reached out to strangers across the country, offering and receiving comfort, always desperate for the tiniest shard of information about her son's fate. Then, in March 2018, hope flickered anew. Word reached the Flathead County Sheriff's Office of a technology company in Seattle, developing cutting-edge drones for use in search and rescue. The firm sought a compelling, unsolved case to demonstrate their new system, and the Brennan mystery was the obvious candidate. The company's drones were engineered with high-definition cameras, thermal imaging, and sophisticated artificial intelligence, capable of flagging objects or patterns in nature that didn't belong. Deputy Rebecca Stone, who still carried the boy's disappearance heavily on her conscience, was quick to grasp the promise of this fresh approach. The drones could go where humans and even dogs could not, and their sensors could find what eyes might miss. Although some within the department were skeptical, Stone persuaded Sheriff Walsh to authorize the operation, regardless of budget uncertainty and reservations. It was a leap of faith, but after 3 agonizing years, everyone agreed. Something had to be tried. The operation was set for late April, when Montana's stubborn winter snows had receded enough to allow access, but before heavy foliage returned. The tech company supplied 3 state-of-the-art drones and 2 skilled operators. The plan was to methodically survey a 50-square-mile swath of terrain, with a deliberate focus on the most inaccessible areas, those which persistent ground teams had never fully reached. Linda Brennan dared to hope, if only a little. After so much disappointment, her optimism was fragile. But she and Tom were there every morning at the forward operating base near the search zone, bringing coffee and sandwiches to the team and watching as the drones rose above the wilderness. The silent machines were sent off with quiet prayers and a sense that maybe the machines would succeed where human effort had failed. The first day was methodical, sweeping over familiar ground, the path from the Brennans' abandoned truck toward Hidden Lake, radiating outwards in computer-generated grids. The drones captured thousands of crystal-clear images, each funneled into AI software programmed to flag every anomaly. Hours slipped by. Nothing conclusive materialized. Yet the team was left with a comprehensive mapped archive, the likes of which no search effort had previously produced. On day 2, the operators pushed the boundaries, flying into regions that had been previously deemed impassable by foot due to dangerous topography or thick vegetation. One drone, fitted with advanced sensors, began scanning for even the faintest signal of metal hidden beneath branches or scatterings of rock. The team moved methodically, letting the AI sift in real time through pattern after pattern, searching for anything that diverged from nature's designs. At roughly 2:15 in the afternoon, a breakthrough. In a dense patch of woods nearly 6 miles from any previous search grid, one drone picked up a geometric shape starkly out of place. Its thermal camera detected an anomaly, sharp lines and unusual heat absorption, possibly man-made. The operator quickly guided the drone downward, and as pine needles and fallen limbs came into frame, a blur of blue fabric peeked out, nearly swallowed by a layer of forest debris. Back at base camp, all eyes Tom and Linda's, Deputy Stone's, and the entire search team's fixed on the live video feed. What the camera revealed was the faded, partially concealed corner of what looked like a tent. Its blue nylon contrasted with the forest floor, given away only by a sliver visible through accumulated leaves and logs. The anomaly's location, tucked in a narrow, isolated clearing ringed by dense brush and steep slopes, explained why it had eluded earlier searchers. Within hours, a specialized team was assembled: Deputy Stone, 2 experienced park rangers, a forensic specialist, and a photographer tasked with documenting every development. Getting there proved arduous, a nearly 4-hour ordeal across unstable rock, tangled undergrowth, unexpected cliffs, and rushing streams absent from regional maps. The path demanded technical rope work down sheer faces and careful navigation of slick, mossy boulders, the sense of tension building with each brutal mile. The sheer isolation of the site explained why all earlier search attempts, no matter how thorough, had failed to discover this small clearing. When Deputy Stone's team finally reached it, it was as if time itself had stopped. What they found was a scene eerily preserved by the forest. A blue nylon tent, distinctly the one owned by the Brennan. Triplets partially caved in under the weight of seasons' worth of fallen limbs and pine needles. The tent's material was bleached and tattered by repeated exposure, yet its presence was unmistakable. This was the very shelter Jake, Luke, and Cole had carried into the wild when they vanished. The ground team documented every detail meticulously, knowing the gravity of what they'd uncovered. Every angle of the clearing was photographed. Every item was tagged before a single branch was moved. Strewn about the tent were familiar belongings, fishing rods and tackle laid out, as though the brothers had been readying for a morning catch. A cold fire ring still ringed with stones, a compact camping stove undisturbed next to stacked cookware. The forensic specialist's early notes painted the scene as one of abrupt abandonment, not orderly departure, personal items left in disarray, nothing intentionally packed. Inside the sagging tent, investigators found 3 sleeping bags and other gear in differing states of decay. Clothing and lightweight equipment bore the clear marks of years spent unprotected in the elements. But they confirmed for certain the Brennan brothers had survived their journey deep into this forest and set up camp before disaster struck. But what disaster? The brothers were still missing, and the camp itself raised more questions. Why had they hiked nearly 6 miles away from their expected path? What might have forced them to leave everything behind so suddenly? Had they even intended to reach this place, or had circumstances, perhaps fear, necessity, or human intervention, led them here? All evidence pointed to the brothers spending at least one night at this spot, but nothing explained how or why they disappeared from it. Stone's first steps after the discovery focused on preserving the scene and calling in additional resources. The case, dormant for years, now pulsed with new urgency. Word quickly reached Tom and Linda Brennan, who were at once grateful for an answer and devastated by the realization that things had not ended well. Forensic teams, photographers, and search specialists soon followed, turning the hidden camp into a tightly controlled investigation site. Everything, every sock, every torn page of a fishing magazine was labeled and packaged for forensic analysis in Helena's state-of-the-art criminal lab. The area around the camp was combed for further clues. Officials sought signs of a struggle or flight, fields where bodies might have been buried, or even clues pointing toward the direction the brothers fled if they indeed left conscious and together. The news broke quickly, sending waves through the media. The story of the triplets surged back into public attention, now wrapped in the additional intrigue brought by 21st century technology. The discovery of the campsite, enabled by advanced drones and artificial intelligence, was lauded as a new era in search and rescue strategy. Early forensic findings soon provided both answers and unsettling new mysteries. Dr. Patricia Wells, the lab's chief analyst, took charge of the evidence. Serial numbers on all the key gear matched those reported as missing in 2015. There was no doubt these items belonged to the Brennan brothers. DNA analysis later confirmed hair samples in the sleeping bags to be a definitive match for Jake, Luke, and Cole, but then came the troubling discoveries. The arrangement of the sleeping bags and personal effects strongly suggested that the triplets had been disturbed at night. All sleeping bags were unzipped and cast aside, not carefully closed or rolled up. Wallets, watches, even prescription medication remained untouched, signs that whatever happened forced the brothers to depart suddenly, without the time or intent to gather their most important possessions. Most striking of all, lined up outside the door of the tent were 3 sets of hiking boots. Each pair was placed neatly side by side, as if by the brothers themselves. The implication was chilling. Had the triplet seasoned outdoorsmen ventured out into that hostile landscape barefoot or wearing only their socks? If so, it defied all logic, especially given the hazardous terrain. Stone and the expanded team returned to the site with cadaver, dogs, and ground-penetrating radar, determined to find physical remains or at least clues as to which way the brothers went. The dogs searched intently, alerting to areas of interest nearby, but no human remains were uncovered. The specialists admitted that after 3 harsh winters, even the sharpest trained noses might find the faintest trace erased. The ground-penetrating radar, painstakingly deployed in widening circles around the camp, found no buried bodies or sites of disturbed soil, nothing to suggest graves hidden beneath pine needles and soil. Analysis of the campsite's position revealed another reason for its long concealment. It sat in a bowl-shaped depression surrounded by towering trees, perfectly invisible from above. The routine was so demanding that only the most determined or knowledgeable hiker could possibly reach it. It was evident the brothers had either stumbled across the site by luck, or been led willingly or otherwise by someone with local knowledge, adding to the confusion. Weather reports confirmed several severe thunderstorms during the week the Brennan brothers disappeared. Especially intense was a storm on July 18, 3 days after the start of their journey. Was it possible the triplets were caught in the tempest, forced to seek emergency shelter in this tough-to-reach hollow? The state of the camp seemed to confirm they'd made it safely, at least for a night. Yet everything after remained unknown. With renewed determination, investigators and volunteers plotted new search routes around the campsite, focusing on every area the brothers could conceivably have reached on foot regardless of weather, terrain, or the conditions suggested by the abandoned boots. The case once again had direction, but the mystery at its heart, a vanished trio, and a wilderness unwilling to give up its secrets, remained as bewildering as ever. Over the next 2 weeks, the renewed search effort was relentless. Teams scoured every ravine, creek bed, and likely shelter within 5 miles of the newly discovered campsite. The prevailing theory was straightforward. The triplets had left their tent and become lost or injured. possibly while trying to make their way back to familiar ground. With hopes raised by the campsite discovery, relatives and volunteers pushed themselves through the punishing landscape once more. But much like the earlier phases of the case, every promising lead faded into silence. No trace of Jake. Luke or Cole was found after forensic work concluded. Linda Brennan made her own pilgrimage to the remote site, guided by experienced park rangers along the steep, tangled route. The journey was exhausting, but for Linda, reaching the place where her sons had spent their final known hours brought both a sense of closure and fresh waves of sorrow. She stood among the pines and saw firsthand the evidence of their last night together, a tent left behind, fishing gear for an unfulfilled morning, but no sign of where the boys had gone. The answers she'd longed for felt as distant as ever. Investigators broadened their scope once again. This time, their focus turned to anyone who might have been present in the wilderness during July 2015. Park rangers and hunting guides, locals with cabins miles from any roads, even seasonal workers and tourists. Conversations unearthed a handful of reports about strange vehicles spotted on isolated roads, but nothing conclusively matched the triplets' situation. The region's sheer immensity meant vast stretches went unobserved, and not every visitor during the crucial week could be traced. An intriguing piece of information surfaced thanks to a retired Forest Service worker, Walter Kowalski. During the summer when the Brennan brothers vanished, Kowalski had conducted a personal wildlife survey in the area. He described seeing 3 young men who resembled the Brennan triplets, walking calmly near a creek about 2 miles from the discovered campsite. Importantly, Kowalski noticed the men seemed to be following another individual, though he couldn't make out this leader's features. The sighting took place in daylight and the brothers looked relaxed. Casting doubt on fears they'd left their tent in panic, Kowalski's report marked the date as July 19th, the day before the triplets were expected to end their excursion. He admitted he hadn't reported this encounter earlier, as it didn't seem relevant at the time. Now, this testimony contradicted theories that the triplets had wandered off lost, or fled in fear if they were following someone they knew or trusted. The chain of events was likely very different. Detectives expanded their research to include every individual with a reputation for moving through the region's hidden corners. Wilderness hermits, illegal hunters, people living off the grid all came under scrutiny. Among those flagged was Marcus Thornfield, a former military veteran who'd spent more than a decade drifting across Montana's backcountry. Thornfield had a record arrest for illegal camping and hunting violations, but he always seemed to slip away before facing any real consequences. Rangers described him as clever, elusive, and potentially volatile if threatened. Efforts to contact him proved futile. He had no fixed address, no phone, and rarely used his real name among locals. His last recorded encounter with law enforcement came in 2014 when he was cited for camping near Bowman Lake. But since then he had melted back into the wild. Investigators dug into Thornfield's past and found signs of trauma he'd struggled with, PTSD after leaving the military, and deliberately kept his life isolated. Despite this background, nothing linked him directly to the triplets' disappearance, and Thornfield's possible involvement remained only speculation as the summer waned. By autumn 2018, optimism was again replaced by the familiar burden of unanswered questions. The campsite discovery had shed light on the brothers' final days, but it hadn't answered the core mystery. Where had they gone, and what had happened after their last night together? Their tent and possessions sat quietly in the county evidence locker, silent witnesses to a story with no ending. The Brennan case was no longer just a missing persons investigation. It had grown into a haunting, complex puzzle. Stubbornly guarding its secrets in the vast wilderness. Winter brought another pause in the search, with thick snow bearing the region and making any ground operations impossible. Yet the case itself pressed onward, with Deputy Stone delving into old case files, poring over topographic maps, re-verifying every statement and theory. All evidence indicated the brothers had not intended to leave the area for good, leading some to speculate about hidden hazards, sinkholes, caves, or even human encounters deep within the woods. In February 2019, An unexpected break came, not from seasoned investigators, but from a graduate student in Missoula. Jennifer Hayes, working on a thesis about historical land use in Glacier National Park, stumbled upon references to a century-old mining operation very close to the Brennan campsite area. Her archival research found numerous records describing mine shafts and tunnels, left behind by the defunct Copper Creek Mining Company, which had operated from 1902 to 1918, before closing up shop and abandoning their equipment. Importantly, many old entrances had never been sealed properly over the decades. They were masked by pine needles, fallen trees, and erosion. Hayes' discovery sparked immediate action. For Deputy Stone, the possibility that the triplets had fallen into one of these hidden shafts was alarmingly plausible. All three could have vanished without a trace in seconds. She organized a new team: mine safety workers, caving rescue experts, and volunteer mountaineers. Equipped with maps and modern ground-penetrating radar, they began searching for every possible entrance within the rugged terrain around the Brennan's last known camp. It was slow, punishing work. Years of shifting soil, rock slides, and thick undergrowth had obscured many entrances, making it difficult to distinguish a mine shaft from an ordinary hollow. Locating these sites was a race against time and the elements, but the renewed investigation was at least guided by a direction that felt tangible. For the first time in years, there was a possibility, however remote, that the wood's silence could be broken, and that the Brennan mystery would finally give up one of its secrets. Many of the mine entrances were almost invisible, shrouded by thick undergrowth or having collapsed long ago. Still, after 3 days of painstaking exploration, the team stumbled upon a partially hidden shaft about a mile from the Brennan campsite. Concealed beneath years of fallen timber and tangled brush, the opening was easy to miss, even for seasoned searchers. It plunged sharply into the mountainside, supported by rotting beams that creaked ominously as they were inspected. The gap was more than wide enough for someone to fall through, particularly at night or in the confusion of a storm, offering a chilling clue to what might have transpired. Mine safety experts immediately noted the extreme danger. The shaft was unstable, with crumbling walls, threatening collapse, and the likelihood of toxic gases, trapped in the depths after decades of abandonment. A cave rescue team was brought in, each member outfitted with ropes, oxygen equipment, and powerful lamps to illuminate the dark labyrinth beneath. Descending carefully, the team encountered a maze of branching tunnels and fractured chambers, some impassable due to collapses. The search was exhaustive and perilous. On the second day, deep within the mine, some 200 feet beneath the surface, they found the answer the Brennan family had feared and sought for years. In a lonely chamber, they uncovered human remains alongside personal effects undeniably linked to the missing triplets. The condition of both remains and belongings spoke to the tragic sequence. Jake, Luke, and Cole had fallen into the mine and become hopelessly lost in its winding passages. The recovery operation was slow and required meticulous care, given the cave's dangers and the critical need to preserve every fragment of evidence. Each item was cataloged and photographed before removal: wallets, jewelry, clothing, each piece confirming the identities of the three brothers beyond doubt. With this discovery, Montana's most perplexing missing persons case drew to an agonizing close. Relief and heartbreak mingled in Linda Brennan's heart, the torment of uncertainty replaced, at last, by the painful finality of truth. Grieving could finally begin, even though the ending was the one she had dreaded. Closure came shrouded not in miracle, but in the reality of a wilderness that cares nothing for human hope. Investigators pieced together the likeliest scenario. The triplets had left their tent together, perhaps responding to a sound or venturing out under cover of night. Unfamiliar with the dense terrain and unaware of the mine's concealed danger, they had fallen into the shaft. Once inside, they were trapped by the darkness and twisting tunnels. Unable to escape or summon help, the Brennan tragedy rippled throughout Montana, changing how search and rescue operations were managed. Drone surveillance became a routine part of investigations, and historical hazard research regarding mines and old structures was incorporated into every missing persons case. Efforts increased to locate, mark, and secure mine entrances across public lands. With new protocols to prevent tragedies like the one that claimed the triplets, a memorial service followed in Billings, attended by hundreds who had supported the family or searched the wild country alongside them. The lives of Jake, Luke, and Cole were remembered with warmth as adventurers, beloved sons, and best friends whose bond was extraordinary and whose loss was deeply felt. The once closed auto repair shop was reopened, transformed into a memorial garage. Proceeds were pledged to local search and rescue initiatives, making the triplets' legacy part of saving others in the future. Tom Brennan returned to his work, drawing comfort from the community that rallied around him, and honoring his sons with every repair and story shared in the shop. Deputy Rebecca Stone, whose dogged persistence was crucial to solving the case, earned a promotion to detective. She went on to specialize in missing persons investigations, channeling the hard-earned lessons, the importance of technology, the necessity of exhaustive research, and never underestimating the mysteries of the wilderness into her work, helping other families cling to hope. The mine itself was sealed off permanently. Warning signs posted to alert future hikers and explorers to the dangers. Hidden beneath the wilderness floor. The hidden clearing where the tent had stood became a quiet place of memory. Family and friends visited, leaving tokens and flowers in tribute to the three brothers who spent their final days close to each other. The Brennan story carved itself into the cultural memory of Montana, a sobering reminder that even the best prepared adventurers can be overtaken by unexpected hazards. Their disappearance and discovery underscored the importance of safety plans, emergency communication, and sharing travel details before venturing into such remote places. Above all, the saga showcased the strength of family, the power of community, and the necessity of hope in the face of impossible odds. Though the case was closed in 2019, its impact continues. Search and rescue strategies are better, communities still remember and honor the triplets, and the message endures. Every wilderness explorer carries with them the dreams and fears of those who love them most. The mountains of Montana, vast and mysterious, hold many secrets. Yet, through perseverance, new technologies, and the unwavering spirit of those searching, even the deepest mysteries can sometimes be solved, bringing a measure of peace to those left behind.